welcome to AI Would Agree. Um, it's been an interesting few weeks. We seem to be ramping up with the future conversations booked in. Got some amazing conversations coming over the next few weeks. Um, Lots of you have reached out and actually mentioned how much you enjoyed the Jim Raw chatbot conversation. So thank you, you've already fed back on that. And I hope everybody kind of enjoyed the predictive CX that we discussed with Simon Norrie on last week's episode. Um, this week, I'm going to go to our first ever South African sponsor for the show. I say sponsor, it's like paid me to do the show, George. But very much a big welcome to George, who I've been speaking to for quite some time behind the scenes. George, I'm not going to ruin your intro summary, but you've had a long and fascinating history with the BPO sector in South Africa. And I think it's fair to say that right now, South Africa is the weapon of choice for a lot of offshoring. There's a lot of efforts going on from the government to kind of boost that capacity and take it to the next level. And you're out there in the thick of all of that. So if you would mind kind of starting out, I guess a brief intro for yourself, what your background is. And I guess, and I know the answer is going to be by mistake, but how did you end up in the BPO sector and the outsourcing sector in the first place?
Yeah, by mistake. No, look at I've been in call centers, basically all my adult life. I went to uni, and dropped out. I was doing aero engineering at Glasgow Uni. I dropped out. I joined the army, and dropped out. And like so many people, got a job in a call center because I needed a job, selling car insurance in Glasgow, and then discovered I was good at it. And finally then sort of discovered I was quite good at training people to do it, and sort of a career started from there. And then I got a job. I've probably been doing it for about almost 15 years, and then I got a job working for a big, quite a long-standing, one of the very first telemarketing companies in the UK, a company called Merchants, and so they had a long history, but they'd been bought by a big South African company, and so I was asked if I would go out to South Africa to just help for a little bit, do some work. I was a consultant, and that was 2007. I came out, and I haven't been back since, pretty much. And the industry was very different then. I mean, there was virtually nothing really going on internationally. We did at that point in time, we had two international clients, both UK, and one of them was the very first UK client in South Africa, which was Asda. But it was, the industry was very young, very fresh, and a lot of the stuff that's happened since then. It's been really interesting to be here and watch it. I mean, where things are now is just the time that we spent trying to convince people that South Africa was a great option. It was a really hard job for a long time, and now it's like everybody wants to come. It's like everyone wants to come to South Africa. So it was kind of, but by mistake. And then once you get here, it's an amazing place. It's an amazing country. It's amazing people. The people that work in the call centers are really special. They're just so full of sort of life and energy and a desire, and that's quite infectious, and just never left. And currently live in Cape Town, and if you've ever been to Cape Town, then it's easy to see why you never leave. It's just one of those places. So it's been an interesting journey, but none of it was planned. It all just sort of happened by accident.
And do you know what? I think that is the common element of the who that's currently involved at a senior level of call centers. I think, certainly here in the UK, working in a call center is almost a threat to kids when they're at school as to what they'll end up doing if they don't stick in. I've had this conversation a few times. Obviously, John Devlin, who kind of spoke about his concerns about that. And I think that's true of a few jobs in the UK. I don't think it's just specific to call centers. I think as if we have it as a nation kind of look down on more manual jobs or customer facing jobs as being substandard and things that you'll have to do because it's necessity. And it can be that way. But kind of time and time again, people see on the show, like people like yourself who've worked their way all the way up the ladder from that humble beginning. And it is the place where dreams can be made in a contact center. And certainly I think you kind of hit on it a little bit there, but it's viewed very differently in South Africa world in terms of working in a contact center, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In some cases, it's not. For a lot of people, there's still a sense of this is not the job that they planned. But there's the unemployment here is such a big problem that for so many people it's a job, and therefore that's a great thing. But if you don't get the experience of working here right, then a bad job's still a bad job. You might last at it longer because you've got no other options. But it still doesn't mean you're going to go out and tell people, hey, you should come and work in call centers because they're awesome. And I think that too many of the call centers in the world have got away with, not focusing on what's the right way for people to, how do you get the best out of people in that call center? And I always think that one of the reasons why someone like me and my co-founder in Intersect, Darren, we both started on the phone, and I think both of us would probably tell a similar story around, it's about, if you were lucky enough to have one of those people who kind of got you and who helped you and inspired you and motivated you and pushed you, then that's the common thread where you see, when you see all those people who've achieved what we've achieved, I'm not saying it isn't because we've worked hard, but there's also been, how do you get over that first blip of the fact that the number of people who come into call centers and then just leave quite quickly. And for me, it's always about, it's there's been somebody, or there's been people who've found a way to inspire you. And so that's the thing, I think, where that's no different here. The attrition here, can still be a problem if you don't get that culture right. Irrespective of, and because the industry's growing so fast, what you end up with is people come in and once they get a skill set, someone's going to be looking for them. So they potentially are going to try and find a new job, a better job somewhere where they feel their value. One of the things I think that I love about South Africans and young South Africans is that they want to feel what they're doing has got some purpose to it. I'm not saying that's in any way unique, but it's there. Even with unemployment as it is, there's still that sense of, I want to feel like I'm making a difference. I want to feel like this is doing something, yeah, that's inspiring to be around, because it's easy to forget that and be cynical and just focus on things like money and stuff. And when you see people who are saying, no, what I want is, I want to feel like it matters and that I matter. It's one of the things I love about this country, and I love about the people here. Is that real sense? But yeah, there's no industry like this one for creating opportunity. But it is important to get it right, because the reason why it's got the stigma it's got is because for an awful lot of people it hasn't done any of those things. So what's the difference? What's the difference between those two?
I think one of the things I like about South African culture is there's a lot of the people, I mean, it could just be the people I've spoken to, but I see a lot of entrepreneurial spirit out there. Everybody's got a business plan. They've got a plan A, they've got a plan B, they've got a plan D. They probably don't tell you about, but they've got a plan D that they don't talk about in public. Or, everybody's got a a lot of energy to put into their own, and sometimes it's their own career, sometimes it's their business plan, but everybody kind of wants to achieve something. And they go out there and they're not afraid to try. I think that's something that we don't do very well here in the UK. Is like a lot of people are too scared to start off on their own. It's almost the exception to the rule. Whereas in South Africa, and I guess that's maybe is enabled by the unemployment situation, but people aren't scared to just roll the dice and give themselves a call, right?
Yeah, I always, for years, have joked about the fact that it, being Scottish is like being a more cynical version of being English, or being, I mean, we as a nation, we can be pretty cynical, and we can be we can be pretty dour, as people would say. And when you come here, it's the total opposite. People just are not cynical. And you're right, considering the obstacles that are presented to them. And look, I mean, in some respects, it's not that different. Many of us grew up in areas in Britain, where things were not awesome. And that did have an impact on your outlook. It's when you see people who are coming from that and coming from worse. they're still optimistic. They've still got that view of I can do, they hustle. I mean that's and it's one of the things that's great about this country for sales. And there's a misconception that somehow that Durban is the place you go if you want to do sales in South Africa, and that's complete nonsense. South Africans hustle. Wherever you are in South Africa, you're going to find great salespeople because these guys will hustle. And we've got, upstairs in the place just now, we've got some guys doing business to business sales for a US software company, and they're incredible. I mean, they're incredible because they're willing to just ask for, it's that asking for the business thing. It's that they're not scared of the slight uncomfortable because they've had to, they've grown up having to deal with difficult situations. So they just need that little sort of, tell me how to deal with this difficult situation, and then I'll take my natural, you saw that natural hustle. That's the way I would describe it. It's a hustle instinct. And you're right. You talk to guys and they'll have, well, I've got my wee thing on the side, and I've got I'm always going to do. But what I would say is that doesn't change what they're doing at the moment. When we don't worry about the fact that the guys have got a secondary hustle, because it doesn't change what they do when they're here. They give their all when they're here. The fact that they've got a secondary hustle just tells me that they're people we should keep hold of because they've got something about themselves. They want to improve. They're not just sitting and going, well, I've got a job, doesn't matter. This is what they're like. How do I improve? How do I get better? How do, and look, some of that's about attracting those type of people. I mean, not everyone's like that. I'm not going to make out like the entire country's made up of go-getters and hustlers, but it's definitely a lot easier to find that than I think it is in the UK. I definitely found here there's a willingness here from people that was a lot harder when you were in Glasgow or when I worked in England. It just wasn't quite the same level of energy that you would get from some of those guys.
I'm beginning to wonder though, there must be something in being from Glasgow and working at a senior level in call centers, because now I've just booked my third guest who's in Glasgow, who's a CEO or a founder of a call center, which I've got obviously Ian Banks in a couple of weeks from Ventrica. We've already had John Devlin. We've got yourself on here. What is it about Glasgow, George? I think that what you've just said there, like I genuinely believe that. I think hard times breed good people who know how to put the effort in, put the grind in, and take the hard times with the good. And I think a hard time breed not necessarily hard people, but strong people who are willing to do what it takes. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely there's definitely a sense of you're coming from a country where you're expected to be able to deal with adversity. I suppose is a more politically correct way of saying that that you're potentially grown up in some slightly deprived areas in your. I mean, the simple things like the weather. I mean, the weather is just so awful in Scotland that you've got to have that sort of hard side to you, some element of it. You've got to be able to persevere through things because 300 days of rain a year or whatever it is, it's going to take the best out of anybody. But I also think there's an element of being, I think of it about being Scottish, which is that there is a community element that says, that fits with call centers, because it's about the view that it's not just about yourself, that you should be considering the impact you're having on other people and how you're helping other people, or what's that. I think that's quite a Scottish thing. Maybe it's quite a northern British thing. It's more that, and I do think that has an impact. My brother always says that there's an element where
anybody who's listening to that, if you're in Manchester, he didn't mean you're in the Midlands. Sorry, I'm going to upset everyone now. You're in the Midlands if you're in Manchester. Anywhere south of Leeds, you're not in the north of England. I'm just going to call that line there. So let's carry on, George. Let's. There's going to be.
I'm going to say nothing on that because I spent a bunch of time living in Bristol, and Bristol people are some of my favourite people on the planet. I just think they're awesome. It's the great thing about Britain is people are so different from so many different places. There's all the unique characteristics. I think Glasgow can be quite a hard town and has been in the past, and so therefore there's an element of perseverance that potentially comes from that. But I think that there's also just a sense of we were brought up. I was brought up. My mum, I once walked out of a job doing cold calling and went home and said I'd walked away from my job. My mum was like, "You go back and get the job, otherwise you can go find somewhere else to live." It's that element of whatever the job is, just do it. Like, don't complain about it, just do it. And so that makes you quite resilient. Quite resilient as well. And so there's a lot of commonality with that when you talk about South Africans, because there's a resilience, which the years of what people have had to go through here, continue to go through here, mean that there's a resilience to the national character, which is highly admirable. And it's a really positive thing to be around. Is that people have got grit, which I definitely recognise as in the Scottish character, or the Northern British character.
Yeah, I love that. There's some great quotes and great thoughts there, George, but very, very honest. And I think kind of we've talked about your unique perspective on. I don't think it's a unique perspective, but I do think it's unique in the way that you talk about the way you look at coaching and coaching your teams from a performance feedback and from a general coaching perspective. And I think when I originally started talking to you about TMAC's coaching product, I think that's kind of what resonated with me the most from our original conversation. Why I wanted to keep coming back to you was like, I really thought that was something that separated you from the crowd. So do you kind of, I guess we've got to talk about push versus pull. And for the people watching, do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I've had this view for a long time, working and when I was working in management development and training, back in the UK, and did lots and lots of coaching skills courses, etc. And a lot of the time that you'd look at it and you'd see the impact that it was having, and it would last a very short period of time. You talk about the fact that there was no tail on it, and you would come to this sort of realization almost that coaching just doesn't work. Like, it's this thing you do, it has an impact for a few days and then it just stops working. So that causes you to just spend lots of time revisiting why is that the case? Why does it feel like it's not really working? And that was and that was where and one of the reasons that Darren and I ended up setting Intersect up together was because the two of us completely aligned on the idea that that there is a way that things work. There's a reason why some of those things work, and it is about the difference between push and pull. If we talk about how technology is used within the process, and I said that's obviously why you're not talking around, because for us technology is such a major part of what makes people successful. But it's because there's this incredible technology like you guys have got at TMAC, that it's been used to help people and to make them better, rather than it's been used to stop people from engaging with customers, or to stop customers from engaging with you. That's the cool thing about it. So for us, it was like, in most cases in businesses, and especially in call centers, performance or coaching is done to you. Someone sits with you and talks to you about what you need to do better, and they may cloak it in the proverbial, excuse my language, shit language, where they'll tell you something good, and in the middle, the meat of it is really them saying, hey, that was rubbish, do better, and this is what you need to do. And the simple fact is the human brain doesn't take feedback in a positive way. No matter what happens, when someone tells you you've done something wrong, your reaction initially is emotional. It just fundamentally has to be emotional. And the difference between people who are good at taking feedback and those who are not is that those who are good at taking feedback, the period of sting on that emotional reaction is just shorter, but it's still there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff loaded into it. And we looked at that and said, but if, for example, if technology gives you feedback, and I call it the Grammarly effect, if technology gives you feedback, you don't get annoyed when your Grammarly on your computer tells you that your spelling's wrong. Whereas I used to get really annoyed at one of my line managers back in the day, who used to keep correcting my spelling and my grammar on my presentations. And I'd get so annoyed about it. And then you get Grammarly and it tells me I've got 150 errors in this report I'm writing. I don't start losing my stuff with it and going, oh, this is ridiculous. You just don't get emotional. And that's the cool thing about technology, is people take information and they pull it to themselves. It's something they choose to take. And because they're pulling it towards themselves and they're not emotional about it, is that it embeds and it has an effect and it lasts it actually makes a difference. And if there's a human interaction, that human interaction should be a positive one. And so the way we do the human interaction coaching here is that if someone's coaching you, they're going to tell you what you're doing right. That's all they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you that was good. That was good. The way you did that with that customer was awesome. Keep doing that. Because the fundamental thing is, if you build up confidence is the biggest thing. The difference between somebody who's good on the phone and someone who's not, the biggest difference between those two people will be confidence. It just will.
Yeah.
And you can get some people where it's not confidence, they just don't care. But there's also an element where the way to make someone care is to make them feel good about what they're achieving, and then use technology. For example, if you're using your TMAC and you've got coaching software, you're using technology now to give people those insights, which then they pull towards themselves and go, got it. Right, I need to do that differently. I've got that. But it's not because, for example, you told me, hey, this is how you should do this webinar. That what you did there was really good, but I wouldn't have said that thing there, and you probably shouldn't have sworn when you did that. But hey, awesome. It was really, really good. At the end of that, the only thing I'm going to remember is you told me that I shouldn't have sworn, and now I'm going to feel bad about it. And that's my takeaway. But if I got some report that came out of the webinar that said, boom, 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 this was great. This is where you got positive reactions from people who were listening. And by the way, you got a negative reaction at the point when you swore, no emotional reaction, no sense of. And that for us, that's what we sort of built the design around Intersect, was go out and find the best technology possible to help make your people better, to help make them do better and to be better, and then use the human component to make people understand things like how someone, what the effect that confidence has on someone, and I think that's something that we absolutely believe. And that's that bit that goes back to why are some people successful when others aren't. If you've got someone, back in, I'll call it the old days, and I had someone who took me under their wing and guided and supported, and what they were doing so often was giving me confidence, was building my confidence in my capabilities, and that made a huge difference to me. And then I was going out and I wanted feedback and I wanted to know what I could do better, and not because they were telling me what to do. And so I do think if you can enable that for everybody, that can be the norm in your culture and a call center. That for us is the difference.
And I think there's some amazing points on there, and very kind of you to say what you said about TMAC. Really appreciate that. I think there's a bit in there around, technology it can't judge you. It doesn't have an opinion. It just offers up the facts. And I think once you understand that, that's the beauty, to your point, that technology can give feedback without fear of that negative connotation, that judgment. Because ultimately, I went through this phase in retail where one of my senior leaders is giving me some feedback, and it really, really cut me up. I was devastated, and I couldn't understand why. So like it was not my leader, it was the leader above that. And I was like, I couldn't understand why I was so upset by the feedback that she'd given me. It was only a one-liner. Um, and I did a lot of soul searching on it. And I realized that it was because she held the keys to me getting promoted. She held the keys to the future of my career, and my respect for her was such that I knew that my reputation hung on what her opinion of me was. And so if her opinion of me was 100%, then I was kicking myself. But the moment I realized that, the sting went, because then I realized, this is the reason why. But to your point, to have technology tell me something along those lines would have made that just so much easier. And the other thing that we're really big on is that a lot of the times these performance feedback conversations, where the only person that has access to those figures is the line manager. So the only time the agent can ever look at their own figures, maybe other than on their digital phone or their software, their dialer software, is actually when their manager comes to tell them that they've done something underperforming, or they've done something wrong. Whereas for me, they should have free access to that. They should be the people that are coming to the line manager going, boss, my ADD is through the roof this week. I don't understand why. Can you help me understand why? Or even to be able to go to their peers and go, George, your first call resolution is amazing compared to mine. Can you tell me what you do differently? Can we sit and have half an hour out of time, boss? Can we sit in a half an hour at time, me and George, to have some conversation? Because I think I can learn a lot from this guy. And
Yeah.
everybody's got all strengths. And it's not about judging people. You're the best member in this team. That's irrelevant. Nobody cares. I'm the best at this metric or this metric or this metric, but I'm also not so good at this one. And I'm terrible at that one. And everybody has something that they're good or not good at, no matter where they're at in their performance. And I think for me, that is the vital change in that whole psychological view of coaching. You know, a lot of people criticize me for calling it coaching sometimes because it's performance feedback.
Yeah.
It's performance feedback. Depending on how you do it, it can be coaching. To your point, if I'm sat there going, tell me what you want to do differently from you. You know, here's your figures. Tell me what's wrong. What you want to do differently. Tell me how you want to improve, and I'll help you get there. That's a very different conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, so our take on that, when we were designing things at the beginning of Intersect, so we said that what we weren't saying was that in human interaction there couldn't be the ability for someone to give feedback and to say this is what you could do better. But the difference is that would be because you pulled that towards yourself. So to your extent, what you've said is, and we call them the gurus, who's the person that's best at first call resolution? Okay, well, I want help with first call resolution. So I'm going to pull towards me this individual and I'm going to say, tell me, you've listened to me, tell me what you think I should do better. And you are fundamentally, because you ask for it, tell me what I could do better, is the emotional, that sort of emotional trigger thing, it disappears. It doesn't disappear completely, but it almost totally disappears, because at that point, what you're saying is come on, I want to know. I want to know. And it's that difference of saying, it's not viewing performance as this absolute, well, you're good or you're bad. It's instead saying there's a continuum here. And that continuum is made up of, there's some stuff that you're good at, there's some stuff that you're not so good at. And I might be good at some of the stuff you're not, and you might be good at some of the stuff I'm not. And you know, Jimmy might be good at stuff that we're not, and both of us are not, and other stuff. So actually in that environment, I should be pulling towards me somebody who's going to help me with the thing I want to do better right now. Not how do you absolutely solve all my performance. Instead, accept the fact that what I'm trying to do is improve my performance by, 10%. I want to improve by 10. And so therefore that's about, you know how to do first call resolution, Paul. So tell me, what would you do differently based on what you've heard of me? And but what that requires is a maturity, almost the saying that people are motivated to want to do that. And that then comes down into just making sure that your reward and recognition programs, are built in such a way that people feel rewarded or recognized because they've made those improvements, that it's just fundamentally built in there, rather than, they're sitting on Maslow's, they're a self-actualized person and therefore they just want to improve sake. A 20-year-old not long out of school isn't going to be that way. They're going to want to improve because you've told them that this is what's in it for them. This is how much money they'll get paid, or this is what that reward is going to be, or, whatever that is, it's something that they can aspire to. And that's the other thing that technology is amazing with, because that sort of gamification component, and gamification on its own doesn't do anything. It's how it's built into the fabric of something, that makes it so important. And you're building it into the fabric of your performance, and what are you doing and someone else's performance, and how can I do these things, and what's it going to do for me? But yeah, it's that. I think that's when you go into a really, really good team, really good call center, I believe that what you see is that the reason that way is because the people that are responsible for leading that's the culture that they create. But what's amazing about technology is what technology allows you to do is to make that ubiquitous. And so we're building an app right now that we want to give to our agents called Ubiquity. And the point about that is that it's about saying it's giving everyone access to that same culture. It's being able to make it ubiquitous, making it homogenized across everyone, has that ability to pull towards them, because to your point, they've got access to that data. It's there. It's for everyone to see. It's not, and that should be the client too. That should be able to say, anyone can see that data. There's no hiding. There's no reports getting pulled together, where you can massage the information to make it look like it was good. It should just be, there's the data, and I think that level of transparency whether the people internally, whether that's with your client, whether, whoever that happens to be, that's when you get really, really good stuff, really cool stuff happening.
It's fantastic. I love your passion when you get talking about this stuff, George, because that's kind of how we hit it off in the first place. It's a very frank and honest initial conversation that's still managed to kind of manifest itself nearly 2 years later. So, George, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and taking the time to walk us through your methodology, your thinking, and kind of what drives you guys, you and Darren at Intersect. Question for you before we call it into the show, though. Is it a dangerous business going out of your door?
Hugely. Hugely. Yeah, it's funny because the way the quote, I mean, where the quote comes from, and that was one of those things that you and I, connected on. Is it's a J.R.R. Tolkien quote, and it's it is what Bilbo Baggins used to say to Frodo Baggins, and it's the thing is that I had just left Merchants. I had been the CEO of Merchants, and I just left Merchants, and you're now having to put something on LinkedIn. And I'd started my own business. It was before Darren and I had started my own business, and you've got to put something down. But like everyone puts these corporate type things on there, and I was like, I felt like I was at the start of a journey. But I felt that was it was a highly risky journey. Like you're starting your own business, and this is dangerous. Like what happens if it doesn't work? But there's also a bit that goes, but what happens if it does work? And is that dangerous too? Because you actually don't know where you're going to find yourself. And so but it's that piece of saying every journey starts with the first step. You don't know exactly where it's going to get to, but you've just got to have the courage to take that first step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and embrace the fact that, you don't know it's going to take you. But, I think my only final comment on that would be is the most important bit of that, though, is remembering that the destination just happens to be another step. And if you didn't enjoy the process of getting to that point, then, you can have the most, big, hairy, audacious goals about what you're going to achieve in life. But if you don't enjoy the moment right now that you're in, try to get to those things, then you'll achieve those goals at some point in the future and go, damn, that wasn't everything I expected it to be, and maybe you wasted 10 years, getting to that point. So it's a dangerous business, but it's a fun business.
I love it. Brilliant. George, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for coming along.
Nice, thank you. Thank you.
If you've watched the show or you're watching the show back up the recording, please do reach out, connect with myself, connect with George. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask George on the back of the conversation that we've had today, feel free to put them on the video. We'll keep an eye on the comments and do our best to get round to everybody. I know there's been a few kind of very positive comments from Brian Marks and Bradley Bonazia. Thanks very much for watching along. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the show as well. Fantastic. And we'll see you around. Take care, everyone. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you.